He's ridden in over 28,000 races and technically he has well over 5,000 wins if you include his victories in the United States, the UK, Hong Kong, and many other places. He's ninth all-time in dollars earned, and he lost 8 years of his career due to retirement. He has 9 Triple Crown victories, 8 Breeders' Cup wins, a George Wolf Award in 1996, inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame in 1998, and he's a 1999 Eclipse Award winner. In the spotlight, jockey, actor, analyst, author, husband, father of 5, Gary Stevens. And Gary, I'm out of breath. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, granddaughter, and soon to be another grandfather. My daughter Ashley's expecting on the 29th, so waiting to get the phone call here soon.
Well, an early congratulations and thanks for joining us and giving us some of your valuable time. Gary, let's start from the beginning. Born in Caldwell, Idaho, not to be confused with the bush tracks of Louisiana as a hotbed for jockeys. Talk a little bit about how you got started and how you began your career.
Well, actually, not to be confused with the hotbed bush tracks of Louisiana, but we have produced some good riders out of our area. A small racetrack, LeBois Park, that's where I started out, and actually a small bush track called Emmett, Idaho. In Emmett, Idaho, there's actually a rodeo going on in the infield, and a lot of people have my first win on a filly named Little Star in April of 1979 for my father. That was my first thoroughbred ride and first thoroughbred win, but it was actually a month earlier. My first win came on a quarter horse filly named Sweet Dancing April, and I rode her about 6 days after my 16th birthday in early March of 1979. So she was my first win. And I traveled when I was 14 years old into Utah and ridden some bush tracks there under an alias, Stevens with a PH instead of a VE. And the reason for that, I went there, and I hope the statute of limitations is over with what I'm about to tell you, because a lot of people don't know the story of when I went there. I wasn't allowed to gallop horses during the race meet at Boise because I wasn't 16 years old, and I'd had experience galloping horses, working horses, and whatnot, and they said you can't gallop horses here on the track, insurance reasons. So I went to Utah, and it was supposed to be unrecognized racing. And I went there to gallop horses, and a guy named Fred Jacobson that my father trained for, he went to doing some hustling for me and got me on like 7 mounts at this race meeting at Salt Lake Equestrian Downs. And there was futurity trials that weekend that were recognized by the American Quarter Horse Association, so it was recognized. And so he says, man, we're going to have to change something, the spelling of your name, a couple digits in your social security, and blah, blah, blah. So I'd never been out of the starting gate before. My older brother, Scott, flew in, and he was my mentor. He was leading rider at Boise at the time, and he had just started out riding about 4 years before I did. And he flew over, was worried sick that I wasn't going to be able to get out of the starting gate. Anyway, I rode, I think, 7 mounts that first day of riding. I won on my second race, a quarter horse going 870 yards, and qualified 2 horses for the futurity. And that was my start in horse racing. And my father's a horse trainer, and you know, I'd been working on the racetrack during the summers since I could remember, you know, mucking out stalls from like 7 years old. And a lot of people go, that's slave labor. And it wasn't slave labor. My brother and I, we couldn't wait to get up in the morning, those summer mornings in Boise, and go down and work with Dad around the horses.
Well, Gary, obviously tens of thousands of rides later. Tell me a little bit about the differences between Gary Stevens as a young rider and the Gary Stevens that sits on the other side of this camera today.
Well, if you can imagine those summers growing up in Boise and being on the backstretch, watching the races. I remember standing, my dad's barn was right near the 3/8 pole at the track there in Boise, and I used to go up on the rail and watch those horses come into the turn. And to me, it's still, the memories I have, it's the best place to watch a horse race from, because that's where all the action starts happening in the thoroughbred races, when things really start to unfold, and you can hear the jockeys. You don't hear the roar of the crowd because you're on the backstretch basically, and you can hear the jockeys fighting for position, the thundering of the hooves and stuff. And I mean, I can remember it like it was yesterday, but it was ruckus, man. There was some hard riders, some good riders that maybe didn't make it in the big time because they had weight issues or other background problems that didn't allow them to go to the bigger racetracks. But um, I become a lot more patient rider than I was even in my younger years racing on the Southern California circuit. I was very aggressive and very aggressive with my whip and just my attitude in general. And as I began to ride better horses for bigger outfits and learning that a big thing in this business is longevity of these good thoroughbreds, making sure that they're around for their next race, that um, you know you're persevering, but you're always in the back of my mind now is that I'm going to have another race somewhere down the road on this horse, and I want a full tank of gas when I climb aboard. So I'd say that's the biggest difference is probably a lot more patience and a lot less aggression than I had when I was younger.
Now, we mentioned in the intro a lot of your successes, many of which came in the first half of your career, and then we're kind of in sections here when we talk about Gary Stevens as a jockey. Let's talk about your early successes, how you handled them, and then what led up to your initial retirement back in 1999 and 2000 when you couldn't go anymore due to your knee issues.
Well, I just told you that my background of starting out riding horses at a young age, and I've got a lot of miles and ridden a lot of races, and you spoke about my number of not only victories but career trips around the racetrack. That doesn't count morning workouts and trips to the hospital, and I'm only about 5 miles, or not even 5 miles, probably 3 miles from Arcadia Methodist Hospital, and I call it my home away from home. I've spent a lot of time in the emergency room there, ICU, and unfortunately, my knees, the miles have taken their toll on them, and it's like anything. You want to get back in the game, out of sight, out of mind. Very competitive business at any level. And when you're not in action, there's a lot of guys that can replace you at a high level. And I did a lot of things over the years, injections of cortisone shots, everything else. And I'll never forget the first time that I had my knee injected. And it was back in 1987. And I remember when Dr. Curlin was putting the needle in my knee, he said, "Do you have any idea what your knee is going to look like 15 years from now?" And I said, "Just do it, Doc. I've got to ride this weekend and blah, blah, blah." And when you're young, you don't think about 20 years ahead of time, or it doesn't matter. I'm worried about the race on the weekend or that afternoon. And it's catch-22. I don't think I would have had the success I had if I, wouldn't have manned up and did what I had to do to ride, because there were people there to replace me. My knees might have felt a lot better than what they feel on certain days. But that's what led to my retirement in 1999, just chronic knee pain. And looking back now, and the same thing in 2005, I wish I would have just said, "Hey, I'm going to take a break. I'm not quitting." And when the time comes again, I think that's probably how I'll handle it. There's no rules that say that we can't take a break in this game. It's difficult because it is year-round. We don't have a season like football, basketball, or anything to really rehab ourselves. Well, I think, the one thing that makes me feel the best about this latest comeback is I've proved that I could stay away for 7 years and come back at a high level. And I didn't know whether that would happen. I didn't know whether I would get those opportunities, but I think I've learned something from it, that if I do start going through this pain again where I'm not beneficial to the people I'm riding for or the betting public, then I need to step away and take a break, let the knees cool down a little bit, and I can come back again.
So you retired for a couple of years, and you get the itch. You're a competitor. When did you start thinking that, hey, I'm coming back, I'm gonna start doing this all over again? And how much of it was a physical obstacle, and how much of it was a mental obstacle to make the comeback and get back to where you were before?
I think the biggest thing was physical obstacle, and the best thing I had going for me was my mental fortitude of just always being tough and saying there were so many people out there saying that it couldn't be done, and people, some of my closest friends, looking at me and just going, "Are you crazy? You can't do this and come back at the level that you were at. Why do you want to embarrass yourself?" And the more that I heard that, the more that incentive it gave me to, hey, I can do this, and I not only can do it, I'm going to do it and do it at a high level. And you know, I buried myself in it, and I had a lot of family support. And those same people that said I couldn't do it, they saw this transition happening of weight coming off and leaning out my body, and they saw how hard I was working. And with that, how hard I was working, and then all of a sudden they started supporting me and saying, "Man, he's going to do this." And I think I knew within probably the first 2 weeks of getting back on thoroughbreds that were race ready up at Pegasus Thoroughbred Training Center, that the way I felt on a horse, nothing had disappeared as far as timing and how I felt on a horse, and the confidence that the horses were feeling in me. One good thing about working as an analyst for those 7 years and watching races from the ground and watching horses train from the ground, always people would say, "This guy has it." Well, what's he have? And they would say that about me. What did I have? I don't know. Well, observing from the ground and watching a Joel Rosario or whatever come up through the ranks, and I'd say, "This guy," I remember when he came to Southern California, I said, "This guy's he's gonna be world class, and he has it." Lafitte Pinkai Jr., he says, what do you mean he has it? Well, he has it, and we see it now. And when I got back, started getting back on horses, I felt like I still have it, and the horses could feel it, and I could feel it. So the confidence just started coming around. But then once again, once I'd started back, you've got to have the ammo before you can perform at a high level. I mean, no matter how good a jockey is, a race car driver, if you take Dale Earnhardt Jr. and put him in a Volkswagen against NASCAR quality cars, not much is going to happen, even though he's one of the greatest drivers of all time. And the same thing with thoroughbreds. So I have to be thankful that I got the opportunities that I have received over the months.
Well, Gary, Peyton Manning, Buster Posey, Mariano Rivera, Adrian Peterson, the 2013 ESPN ESPY nominees for Best Comeback. Forbes magazine was hip. They called your return the sports comeback of the year. But did it bother you at all that some of the mainstream sports stations, networks didn't take as much notice of your comeback and success as maybe they should have, because it's just been absolutely phenomenal? I'm a sports fan. I'm a racing fan too, and I can't think of any better comeback.
It didn't surprise me because for whatever reason, ESPN has forgotten about thoroughbred horse racing. They have not, evidently we're not mainstream enough. And, they were a huge supporter. And if this is my time to bash it, then I'm going to bash it. We are a sport. We are athletes. And I think the thing that disappoints me the most is that people in our industry didn't push for it. That where were they at? When all this was going on, were these people, did they have their heads buried in the sand? And it's like certain people have to nominate for Best Picture, for actors, or whatever. Somebody has to do it. An actor's not going to do it for himself. What he does on camera speaks for itself. What I did on the racetrack spoke for itself. So it wasn't my job to go out and hustle myself. And at the end of the day, I have the memories of 2013, the Preakness Stakes on Oxbow, the victories on Mucho Macho Man, Beholder, and She's a Tiger in Del Mar, and her victory at Nightmare. standing out there waiting while it felt like we were going to the gallows, and I knew our number was coming down in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies. The longer they took, the more I knew what was going to happen, and it finally happened, and that was a negative on the day. But I have great memories of what happened in 2013, and the people in our sport, I think, recognized what went on. I definitely know what I achieved last year, and it was probably the greatest achievement in my career. I know that as a whole, it was the best year numbers-wise of the smaller volume of horses, but the quality of horses I rode and the level that I rode at. I'm very proud of the accomplishments of 2013 and so far what's going on in 2014.
Well, Gary, let's talk about some of the other things that you've done in between retirements and comebacks. You mentioned being an analyst. Obviously, you did a lot of network work. You did TVG, you did HRTV, and you got a chance to see the game from a different perspective and become the analyzer instead of the analyzee. But you've also done movies. We all know Seabiscuit in your role, George Wolfe. Talk a little bit about being an actor. I mean, is that something that you think came naturally to you? Did you study that at all? And how much did you enjoy doing that movie to begin with?
I loved it, and being naive sometimes about can be a gift. And I say that about early on in my career. If I would have known how difficult it was going to be to get to the level that I'm now at in the thoroughbred industry, I don't know if I would have pursued it. But everything just kind of came naturally for me, and I kept going on to the next step, and there was no mountain that was too high for me to climb. And when I was asked to, star and be one of the co-stars in Seabiscuit, I had no idea going into it how big the part was going to be or how big the movie was going to be. I had an idea, but being naive was a great thing, and being surrounded by great actors, producers, and directors was a great thing. And the way they treated me was very similar to the way the first time I met Bill Shoemaker. I mean, he put his boots on and his jock pants on the same way as I do every day, and these actors treated me with that grace and gave me confidence and became my friend, and it made the job much easier. But it is a job, and as far as did it come naturally? Well, I think the one thing I've learned is the part in Seabiscuit and the part in Luck and some of the other acting things I've done, it's all about casting. And I was very comfortable with the character that I was cast as, because I didn't have to act a whole lot. I mean, I had lines that I had to deliver, the right way. But as far as the character that was portrayed to me in George Wolfe and the history historical things that I'd learned about George Wolfe, there were a lot of similarities and a lot of things that weren't a real big stretch of the imagination for me to get across the screen, and certain things I'd lived and certain things that I had observed for scenes in real life that I could put in to get across on the camera. There was a scene in Seabiscuit when Tobey Maguire, Red Pollard, was in a bare-fisted boxing match, and he'd gotten extremely drunk afterwards, and we had words after that, and I went back to a place in real life with a very close friend of mine that wasn't even a stretch of the imagination. I had actually lived in that moment that was on camera, just with a different person. So those were things that I was taught to put into my mind and be able to get inside of my inner self of things that I'd actually experienced in life that were good lessons to be taught.
Well, Gary, let's talk about Ronnie Jenkins, because in Luck you became Ronnie Jenkins. And I remember a couple of months after Luck was taken off the air, was discontinued, you and I were standing on the backstretch at Pimlico after the Preakness, and we were talking about it, and you were disappointed, obviously, because that show was going to really go places. This right now could be the fifth season of Luck had it continued, and people say everything happens for a reason. If this were the fifth season of Luck, would you be back in the saddle?
No, definitely I wouldn't have. And I think that my disappointment with the cancellation of Luck and the sort of place I'd put myself in with that disappointment of really becoming Ronnie Jenkins. And I was even, I would call myself a character actor. I was living a lot of Ronnie Jenkins' life at the time that we were filming, and I was a happy Ronnie Jenkins off the camera and enjoying the life and looking towards the future. But we'd become a family, and all of the cast members and just everybody, the crew, and the rug was pulled out from under us. It all happened in like a 6-hour period, and it was a whole life that was gone. And we sat around, many of us, and tried to console each other. There was a wake, literally, for Luck within 24 hours of it being canceled, and we were all in shock. And anyhow, seeing that, I had to figure out a way to get out of the doldrums that I was in, and it motivated me. And everything does happen for a reason. And if Luck wouldn't have been canceled, no, you would have never seen me in the saddle again. I was very satisfied with the direction that my career was going, headed in, and the opportunities that were developing because of that. But I can honestly say that here, a couple years later, I'm very happy with the way things have turned out.
Well, obviously you made things happen. Gary, is it safe to say that you're competitive with life itself?
Yeah, very competitive with life itself. And I guess I've mellowed a little bit, but it's sort of a ongoing joke. They call it, if somebody gets pissed off at somebody, oh, I went G Stevens. This guy went G Stevens on somebody, and it's there. I call it passion. I'm very passionate and about the whole sport in general. And one thing I've never been shy about, giving my opinion, wearing my heart on my sleeve. It's right there, exposed all the time, and it's just me. And I enjoy that about other people too. And sometimes you're like, oh, just shut up, don't say it. And I hear this little voice in my head sometimes saying, don't say that, Gary, don't say it. Oh yeah, this side of my head saying, oh yeah, really.
In the end, you're going to have arguments with yourself, but it's about being true to yourself and agreeing with yourself in the end. And you can only be true to who you are, and the competitiveness is what makes you Gary Stevens.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, even on the racetrack, and I love battles on the racetrack. When I watched the Rebel Stakes the other day with Opportunity and Tapiture coming through the stretch, and Strong Mandate, and Right on Curlin. I mean, that was horse racing at its best, and I'm like, God, I'd love to be in the middle of that right now. And that's what it's all about. And not only your horse out gaming the other competition, but as a rider, maybe out gaming the guy next to you as well.
Well, Gary, you've ridden so many phenomenal horses on variety of surfaces, different distances. If you had to pick one horse to go to battle with in a 9-furlong dirt race, and I mean go to battle with, who would that horse be?
Based on performances throughout my career, there's no doubt. Give me Mucho Macho Man of what I felt going 10 furlongs in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, because at 9 furlongs, no question. Give me Mucho Macho Man when he's on top of his game. That feeling of power that I had going through the backstretch and coming into the stretch for the Breeders' Cup Classic put me in the battle with him anytime.
Now, you talked earlier, Gary, about how much you love the sport of horse racing, how much you wanted to see it succeed, not only your own career, but just as a whole, and the fans and the owners and the trainers and all the people that are involved on a day-to-day basis and all the hard work that goes in. You're one of the very few real spokesmen for this game. You have the Mike Smiths, who I know you're good friends with, the Joe Talamos, the Doug O'Neills, people that'll come out and speak and be vivacious and be open and be honest and be true characters. I think horse racing needs more of that.
Yeah, definitely. And we need to stop as a whole. We need to talk more about the positives of our sport. No one wants to constantly hear the negative things. I mean, let's be honest about the sport, but let's also bring out the good things. Let's don't just talk about the negativity. Look at what the negativity of doping in bicycle racing and with what has happened over the last couple of years. I mean, it's become a joke. We don't even talk about, or at least I don't, the big bike race, what do you
Tour de
call
France, yeah.
it? The Tour de France, sorry. The Tour de France and boxing, the same thing. It's sort of lost its, I don't know, luster of honesty with judging and this and that, where a lot of people just turn it off. They don't even watch it. And I think that we in the industry are responsible for that a little bit. And I think that we're also, some writers are guilty of uh, bad, bad writing, and they have a responsibility to not only write about the negativity, but write about the glorious things, and not just on when we're center stage, for the Triple Crown races and Breeders Cup. This is a year-round business and a year-round game. And there's some beautiful things that happen at the racetrack on a Thursday afternoon, and not just at the highest level. So the more we can get that out there. Is it too late? I don't know. I'm glad that I'm 51 years old right now, instead of 19 years old right now, because I came into the game when it was in its heyday, the early 80s, and I got to see it at its best, and I've got to see it go downhill in a certain sense, and I've got to see it go up to a different level with what the Breeders' Cup has become now, and even the Triple Crown is, even though we haven't had a Triple Crown winner for so many years, we've seen how big it has become on a national stage. But our game is bigger than just those three races, or the Triple Crown races. I should say 5 days of racing is not the whole year. It's building up to that. And when I say 5 days, the 3 Triple Crown races and 2 days of Breeders' Cup racing, it's way more than that.
Yeah, I mean, there's beautiful experiences at the racetrack, whether you go on a Wednesday afternoon or whether you're there for Kentucky Derby Day. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's the onus is on all of us to pull on the same side of the rope and let people know how fantastic this game can be from many, many levels. So we definitely appreciate you being a spokesman for the sport, because there really is not anyone that's better at it. Gary, in 2002, you authored the book about your life and career called The Perfect Ride. 12 years later, that book needs a few more chapters and perhaps even a screenplay. Maybe Gary Stevens can play himself much like Calvin Borel did in 50 to 1.
I don't know about that. From the reports I've heard, Calvin he's getting great reviews right now from people in the business. But yeah, I might have written that book a little bit too early, and I'm still looking for the perfect ride, and that the title of that book was satirical, and that I didn't feel like I'd ever had the perfect ride. There's always something you can do a little bit better, and I think that I came closer to it last year in a couple of rides than I ever had in my career. I think I put up on a couple of different occasions some of the better rides that I had ever put up. So I'm just glad that I decided to make this comeback so I could experience what I'm experiencing right now at last year age 50 and now at 51. The feelings that I'm experiencing are actually better than at any time in my career. And the reason I say that is you don't know when it's going to end, when you're going to get that high that I've been able to experience so many times in my career, and then come back and get to do it again. I think that's one of the things that was driving me. I'm adrenaline junkie at the end of the day.
Now, outside of winning races and that lifelong quest for the perfect ride, what makes Gary Stevens happy?
Um, Being at the racetrack, I guess, in the mornings. I love being out in the morning. I was out at Santa Anita this morning, and I go out with what my agent calls the not in service look, and you see the buses driving around town or taxi cabs, and it'll say this cab not for hire, or this a bus will say not in service. And I had on the baseball cap, T-shirt, and some khakis with no socks and some Sanuk shoes on this morning, and Bob Baffert looked at me and he says, "Oh, not in service this morning, huh?" And I said, "No, not in service. Just watching the horses train out there with a cup of coffee in my hand, and it's beautiful. I mean, and you'd be amazed at what how many things I can pick up in the morning out there just watching the horses train that I didn't used to really value. Maybe I didn't know what I was looking at so much. I always needed to be on their back, and I can go out there and enjoy that and observe and learn some things about not only the horses I'm riding, but some of them that I'll be competing against. So those are my happy moments. And you know, there's very few days, whether I'm in Kentucky, here, New York, or whatever. If I'm in town. When I was at Gulfstream for the Sunshine Millions, I was out to the track every morning out there, and it's something I enjoy.
Well, Gary, you said you don't take anything for granted when it comes to your riding career, but where do you see yourself maybe 10 years from now? You've been a jockey agent before, you've dabbled in training as well. What's left for Gary Stevens?
Well, I'd love to, and I will. I don't know what point, whether it will be next week, next month, next year, whatever, but getting back in the announcer's booth with HRTV and NBC ultimately. And, you know, NBC has just signed on through 2025 for the Kentucky Derby. And, you know, I'm still part of that family. And you know, I'm in touch with Rob Hyland, who produces all of our Triple Crown shows, and spoke with him a couple of weeks ago and talked about some things. So that's a pretty good feeling to know that you're still in that family and still in the family with HRTV. But, you know, I love training, but the financial end of it, of you know, making sure that all the bills are paid and that the owners are paying me on time and everything. That's a headache I didn't like. But my son, TC, Tori, is training now. He's at Gulfstream for the winter. Be headed back here to Kentucky soon. And, you know, I'd like to work with my son, be his assistant. Maybe, you know, drawing some more business, you know, get him some more owners and be work with him and getting some good young horses, that sort of thing. Be sort of a PR man for him, and also help with the training a little bit. I would love that.
Well, Gary, I think the hourglass that you set for me ran out a little while ago. So as we wrap this thing up, do you have any final thoughts on your career, on racing, on our future, and what people can do to make sure that this game succeeds in the coming years?
No, I'd basically like to say thanks to the fans and the bettors that are out there that actually make this game happen every single day. Because at the end of the day, I can get angry with them, the hecklers, but they're putting on the show. At the end of the day, they're paying the bills. We're putting on the show, but they are paying the bills. And I'd like to thank them and the owners and the trainers. And just my only thing I'd say, let's be positive about this game, not so much negativity. Let's talk about the positive things. We've got the Kentucky Derby coming up here shortly. It's going to be upon us before we know it. All the great prep races are going on right now. We've got the Arkansas Derby, Louisiana Derby, the Florida Derby, the Wood, the Santa Anita Derby, the Bluegrass. I mean, it's on top of us. And I'm out this morning discussing strategy with my agent, and not only about that, but the Oaks. Who are we going to ride in the Oaks? You know, I'm excited about that. But let's just keep this ball rolling like it is right now. It's a shame that there's this lull between Breeders' Cup and the Triple Crown races. And for me, it goes quickly. But for the rest of the public, it's not so quick. It seems like ages, you know, between this clump of races. So let's just keep it going, man.
Well, Gary, we wish you good vibes for this upcoming Triple Crown season, the rest of your career, and whatever you decide to do when you hang up the tack. And who knows, like you said, you might hang up the tack and decide to make yet another comeback. That all remains to be seen.
Yeah, it does remain to be seen. And like I said, there won't be another retirement announcement made. Gary's taking a break. That's what it's going to.
There you go. There you go. All right, for Gary Stevens, I'm Joe Kristufek for AmericasBestRacing.net. Live it, love it, play it, share it, and bet on it. We'll be in the spotlight again in just a couple of weeks.